We are continuing our study in the book of Genesis, chapter 20, dealing with the account of Abraham and Sarah and a king called Abimelech. All right, let's just get right into it. We'll just start from Genesis chapter 20, verse 1. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned into Gerar. So this is kind of letting us know where we are. So we just finished dealing with the account of Lot and that tragic story. And now we're switching back again to Abraham. So just kind of just giving us an indication of where Lot is, what's going on with Lot at this time. And so it says, and Abraham journeyed from thence. So what's the thence? I think we kind of know the thence. The thence is what's called the Oaks of Mamre, where the Lord appeared unto him with these two angels as well, and the Lord told him that he was going to have a child, and about a year from now, and that's when Abraham interceded on behalf of Lot. That was that experience there. That was in the Oaks of Mamre, or the area called Hebron. All right, that's the thence they're talking about. And just to kind of go back, just to give you some of the land area where we're at. Um, this area here, let's if you can see this arrow here, that's called Mamre. That's what we call the Oaks of Mamre or Hebron. That's actually not, that's this lower blue dot right here. That's where Abraham is at. And then as we go down to this other area here where this water is, this region here, this is what we had called like the Valley of Shittim, where Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah were on this side here of the Jordan Plains here. So Abraham is in this region right here, and he is going to travel what's called the Way of Shur. It's like this little pathway that goes all the way down and goes down into Egypt. I don't think I have another depiction of that, but the land of Shur is when you're getting into the area of region that leads into Egypt. This is Gerar here. This is where the Bible is saying that Abraham, which was over here in Hebron, the plains of Mamre, he travels southward to get to this place, Gerar, and then he also travels southward to this place called Kadesh. So he's in this region, traveling in this whole region here. This pathway here is called the Way of Shur. It leads to Egypt, right? So that's just kind of looking at the land area of where Abraham is journeying, right? So it says Abraham journeyed from thence, from the plains of Mamre or Hebron to the south country, which we talked about, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and then he ended up sojourning in Gerar. Now, Gerar happens to be the land of the Philistines, and if we know a lot, which we may in the future get to study a lot about the nations uh, of the people of the Philistines, we know that they are enemies of God, that they were idolaters and things like that. But this is still early in the process, we're going to see, because early in the process, we're going to see that the Philistines are going to have a king that actually knew what right and wrong was, right? He had some insight into who God was, who the God of Abraham was, right? This is taking place just right after the account of Sodom and Gomorrah taking place. And I guarantee you that the word went out that fire rained down from heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah and the plains all about, and Lot was able to escape, right, because of his righteousness, and that Abraham interceded on behalf. So I'm sure that story went out, right, about Abraham, and just about the knowledge of the Most High God, right? And so there seems, and that story went out, we're going to see that there is some kind of understanding of who God is. We're going to see that maybe 400 to 500 years later now, all of the Philistines and all of those in the lands of Canaan, they're going to be their time is up. They've come to a point of full transgression against God. But right now we see in that early years, 400 years before the Israelites go into the land of Canaan, and God tells them to just wipe out um, the transgressors in the land. We see earlier that they did know God and had a fear of God, things like that. So we'll see that here. Right. So the verse 2, it says, and Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. So it immediately just jumps to that when Abraham goes into Gerar, the land of the Philistines, he had already rehearsed, and because we know this, because this has already happened before, and he had already set up that he was telling people, and Sarah was in agreement with it, that Abraham was telling the people of that land, of the Philistines, that Sarah was his, what, although Sarah was his wife, that Sarah was his sister. And he told the people that Sarah was his sister, right? Because Abraham, that wasn't the first time he's done that, right? And so notice here that I kind of underlined and put a colon of this relationship here in verse 2, where it says Sarah, his wife, and Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. So that's the message that he put out when he was in the land of Gerar, the land of the Philistines. He put out that Sarah, she is my sister. And they put a colon there, and I kind of underlined because I said when you see that colon, it's tying that what is that part A of that sentence is tied to a reaction, or what follows is a result of what is on the other side of that colon. So because the people that were in the land of Gerar, the Philistines, when they saw Sarah and it was Abraham's sister, then it was like, okay, because of that, then King Abimelech, when it was found out that she was very beautiful, right, he sent for her. And he probably had servants or soldiers come and just take her and gather her up. And he took Sarah. And he's letting us know the reason why he took Sarah, because Sarah was just Abraham's sister. And as the king, he could do that, right? And so that's kind of showing the causality of what's going on here in the heart of the king of Abimelech, right? And but because of the decision of what Abraham had said, it resulted in the action of what King Abimelech actually did. So it's kind of showing those together. So now we see that in verse 1, it tells us where we are, right? Where Abraham was, and then where he is now. And why? Because where he is now, why he's having to say what he's having to say, or felt what he's saying he had to say. And then verse 2 lets us know, it introduces that this account here is going to be between these two major individuals here, or three major individuals: Abraham, Sarah, and Abimelech. So we introduced that the focus of this story is going to be on Sarah, his wife. We're going to see Sarah, his wife, Sarah, Sarah over and over. So it's kind of letting us know what's going on. And then it introduces King Abimelech. And then we talked about, then it shows us why the king Abimelech gets pulled into this, because of the relationship of Abraham saying, she is my sister, or Sarah, his wife, is his sister. And that's how Abimelech gets pulled in, not of his own doing, but because of the deception. Right. Yes. Someone asked a question here. Lee asked, "Want to know what is it? Isn't it not true?" Yes, it is true that Sarah is Abraham's wife. So he is being truthful. Sister, yes, yes, yeah. He is being truthful in that fact that Sarah is Abraham's sister as well. Right. As we move on to verse 3 here, it says, "But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife." Now, notice here how this story starts out. It starts out in Genesis chapter 20 with verse 1, it starts with and verse 2, it starts with and the and, when you see the reoccurrence of the and at the beginning of a sentence is here in each verse, lets us know there's a flow of events that are occurring, right? It's just one thing that's happening after the other. It's happening very quickly, and this, and that, and this, and that, right? But then it says, "But God came," right? Because there's a progression of the action that which God told Abraham to journey, right, into the land of Gerar. And then the next progression happens, and then Abraham said, "Sarah is my sister." And then, as a result of this, there's a progression that happens. And then King Abimelech snatches up Sarah. So then there's sure that there's this rapidly occurring progression that God has to stop in and halt it. So it comes in verse 3, and it says, "But God came." Because what it's showing us, letting us know that there's a progression that's happening. It's happening very quickly, and God has to intervene on the instincts and nature that man does, right? We don't understand sometimes our actions are responsible for the actions of others, right? And so there's this progression that happens in our humanity, right? When we are not aware of all of the situation that's going on. So then God has to intervene to stop the human interactions that man does, right? So it says, "But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night." All right. So he interjects himself to halt the progression of something that he does not want to happen. Right. And when we look at this account here, God doesn't really put too much blame on Abraham as we read the story. And the blame in the end of this doesn't even fall on Sarah at all. Right. But the blame actually seems to really fall on King Abimelech. right? But we're going to see that God actually shows him mercy and grace upon his life here. So God appears unto Abimelech in a dream. So everything we're talking about here appears to him in a dream by night, right? Again, when we talk about the night, again, we're talking about something that is going to happen. Or dreams occur, basically when people are sleeping, but we're talking about when a person sleeps is at night as well. But it's intervening at nighttime so that no dark deed or evil deed be done. So we associate the night with deeds that are done that are wrong or sinful and things like that. So he appears to him in the night, right, to expose deeds that may be wrong. So often when you see dreams coming and they're coming at night, it's because they're trying to expose wrongful deeds, and we'll see that as we go throughout Genesis, and we're going to see accounts of dreams that are coming at night. It's exposing, lots of things that are done wrong and stuff like that. All right, but it says, "Behold, thou art but a dead man." Now, what if God comes in and tells me, "You are but a dead man"? You're right. That's like horrifying. You are a dead man, boy. You are but a dead man. All right. It says, "The woman now is taken, for she is a man's wife." So that's the focus of the problem here. So God identifies the problem that she is a man's wife. So every time we're going to see about Sarah, it's that she is the wife of Abraham, the wife of Abraham, his wife, his wife, his wife. We see over and over. That is the focus of the problem here, right? That God has joined Abraham and Sarah together in this bond and in this promise and in this future together, right? And the promises that are going to come through Sarah and unto Abraham and unto the nation of Israel, it's going to come through Sarah. And Sarah has a promise and a blessing upon her, and the blessing upon Abraham, them being joined together. That's the key to how the blessings of God is going to bring about a lot of the prophecies of God that is to come forth, and the coming forth of the Messiah through the nation of Israel and things like that. Right? Is that Abraham joined with his wife? That's the key focus here, and he's intervening. He's stepping into something that he's not aware of, right? But verse 4 says, "But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, O Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation?" Now, this is kind of strange here. All right. Well, I'll just start with the but Abimelech part. So here it starts out with verse 1 and, verse 2 and, so this rapid progression. And then God jumps in and says, but God came in. So he halts the progression of something. And then when God reveals to Abimelech that he's but a dead man because he's taken a man's wife, then Abimelech, we see here, he halts a progression as well. So this but means that it's halting a progression as well. So Abraham recognizes that God is trying to halt the progression. And when God tells him, you're but a dead man, then Abimelech jumps in and says, but, right? The but Abimelech. So Abimelech is, oh, wait, let me halt this progression as well. And he halts the progression by saying, will thou slay the righteous nation? Will thou slay a righteous nation? Right? This phrase here, slay a righteous nation, it has this similar phrase that we read when we studied the account of, I think, or in Genesis chapter 18, when Abraham was interceding on behalf of Lot, and he was saying, will you destroy Sodom? Right? If there's 50 righteous in there, 45, and then round down to like you find, I don't know if it was like 10 or something like that. Can you find 10? Will you slay the righteous with the wicked? Stuff like that. Right. And I think this is put in here like this, as I started out saying at the beginning of this chapter 20, is that this follows the account of Sodom and Gomorrah, of how Lot was able to escape because he was righteous, and the account that Abraham had already revealed that God is a righteous God and he will not destroy the righteous, right? And he won't destroy that. And so we see here that that's why I believe that there is some kind of introduction here of the knowledge of what took place in Sodom and Gomorrah, because I don't think anybody could. I think that had to go far and wide. That destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, fire raining down from heaven. I don't think that has never happened before. That had to go far and wide. And that account of what had happened there, right? Because Lot escaped and went into another city called Zoar. And I'm sure they were like, whoa, what are you doing here? And he told them, like, I was over there in Lot. I was over in Sodom and Gomorrah, and I escaped from there, and God took me out of there, and I put me here, and he fearful, and he went into the caves after he left. I'm sure that story went far and wide about what happened there, and the knowledge that the Most High God is a righteous God. He does not slay the righteous. He does not slay a righteous. He will not slay a righteous nation. And I believe that that's what's being inferred here, that this knowledge had come to Abimelech, how God is a righteous God. And there was fear in the heart of Abimelech. We're going to see some things here that's going to reveal about the knowledge of what happened between with Abraham and with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. That knowledge of the Most High God and His righteousness, right? It went out in the land of Canaan. It went out in the plain of Jordan, right? So the good aspects of here is that King Abimelech was able to put a but in there as well to bring a halt to the progression of God saying, "You're but a dead man because you've taken a man's wife." And he begins to do what Abraham did, right? He and almost in the same kind of question format, like, will you also slay the righteous? Will you slay a righteous nation? So that's what I'm saying, following the account of what happened in Genesis chapter 18 and 19 with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I believe that there was this retelling of the account of what happened. And Abimelech also now is aware of the Most High God. He does not slay the righteous. So he begins to now then do what Abraham did. He intercedes without slay a righteous nation, right? Will you slay the king? And when you slay the king, you destroy the nation, right? And I believe one of the reasons why he says that But Abimelech had not come near to his near to Sarah, because I believe as we talk here that there was an affliction that was put upon the bodies of both the men and the women. The women, their wombs were closed, and the men were unable to enter into relations to produce conception. So I believe some kind of impotence put on their bodies, so they could not perform any kind of intimate acts or anything like that. Right. So he had not come near to her, and God had made sure that he could not, as well. And so I believe that's what's going on here. So as we move into verse 5, it says, said he not unto me, this is Abimelech speaking to God in this dream, like, Abraham never said to me that Sarah was his wife. Verse 5 says, said he not unto me, she is my sister, and she even herself said, he is my brother. So Abimelech is recounting what Abraham said. Abraham said, she is my sister, right? Didn't Abraham say she was my sister? And did not even Sarah say that herself, that he is my brother? So he is defending that he is righteous. And because there's righteousness, he's saying, God, you can't slay me. You can't kill me like this, right? So he says, in the integrity of my heart and in the innocency of my hands have I done this. So he says, I took this woman in innocence because I was informed and told that this is Sarah is not Abraham's wife. They are brother and sister, right? So this reveals something about King Abimelech, or the king of the Philistines, 400 years before the nation of Israel or the Hebrews move into the land of Canaan, and they have to destroy all the people. It shows then that there was a time that the kings and the people of that region came to know the Most High God, and they had a fear of God, and they understood what right and what wrong was. He talks about here the integrity of my heart. So he was aware of, and they had already been convicted to know that there were certain motives and beliefs that were righteous or unrighteous, that were sinful and unsinful, that they had a knowledge of that, right? Speaking of, when it speaks of the heart, reveals of the inner knowledge of God's righteousness, right? And he knew that. So the integrity of my heart, right? So before the nation, at some point, we're going to see how bad the Philistines have come in their idolatry and things like that. And God has wiped them out. And all the nations that were in the land of Canaan, there was this time where they did know about God, the Most High God. He also talks about King Abimelech talked about the innocency of my hands. Then when he speaks of the hands, it talks about what one does, what they put their work to, right? So he's saying this reveals also then that God judges what we do, right? And what we do with our body, what we do with our hands, what our purpose is, that our purpose is to do those things that are not sinful, right? It reveals God's knowledge that Abimelech had to live free from sin, that he's not to put his hand to do evil and to do sin, right? And so here we see then that there was this knowledge of the Most High, the righteousness and standards that the Most High God had put into the hearts of men, right? During this time, but later on, of course, they strayed far from that, and then they had to be considered an abomination, had to be cleansed from the land. But it wasn't always that way, right? But as long as King Abimelech had this knowledge of what right and wrong was, right, God was then able then to extend to him proper justice and judgment. Verse 6, it goes on, and God said unto him in a dream. So this is still part of the dream. It's all this interaction that's going on. It's still part of a dream. He says, yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart. So God confirms, Abimelech, I know you are doing right, that your heart, there was integrity in your heart to do right, right? So that he says, so that's why, verse 6, he says, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me, therefore suffered I thee not to touch her, right? So God kept him back from touching her so that he would not sin. So here we see God interacting in a person who was not trying to do wrong or trying to sin, right? God helps them and warns them so that they don't sin against God. So that shows the mercy and the love of God intervening in the acts of Gentiles, right? And so it just shows that His love is and His mercy extends abroad here. So God spoke to him from a dream, keeping him from sinning and to allow him to maintain his integrity. So this man did not, the way it's indicated that his integrity, that if he knew that this was Sarah's wife, he would not have taken if Abimelech knew that Sarah was Abraham's wife, he would not have taken Sarah, right? He would have kept his heart and his hands righteous before God. And God did not want him to have that integrity lost and to enter into sin. So God stopped him to maintain him from doing that. And we see this throughout so far the Old Testament account. Before Cain was able to, before he sinned against God, God gave him a warning to prevent him from entering into sin. And we see this account on many other occasions as well as we continue to read throughout the Old Testament Bible. So we see here that God, He does not want us to sin. And before we sin, He comes and He warns us not to do something, right? To how to avoid it, things like that. We see that's the nature of God. His mercy and his grace. He wants to prevent us from doing sin. Verse 7, it says, now therefore restore the man his wife. So here we see the focus of the problem is that this is Sarah's wife. Should not be your wife. You shouldn't have her because it's another man's wife. But then he reveals another reason why he needs to return this man's wife, and why the judgment against him is so severe that you are but a dead man, right? It's because that Abraham is a prophet. This is the first time we see an indication that Abraham is a prophet, right? Now, Jesus spoke about this as well. He talked about the prophets from the foundation of the world. Speaking of Abel, and he talked about Abraham, he talked about David. Jesus talked about these things that they were prophets. And for many were like, well, they never knew that Abel was a prophet and David was a prophet and all these men were prophet. That Abraham was a prophet as well. He says he is a prophet. That's why I'm stopping and intervening because he is a prophet here, right? And so Lord tells him restore his wife. So it's a warning for him to do right. Again, the focus is always on Sarah as the wife. Then it's revealed that another reason why, man, you will die if you violate Sarah, because he's also a prophet. And that gives the motivation for Abimelech to return Sarah. The fact that he is a prophet. So when he tells him that, so there seems to be like this understanding of Abraham being a prophet, or a concept of what a prophet is. Because when he hears that Abraham is a prophet, right, he's like, whoa, like this is a serious matter here that's going on. And how do we know that when it says Abraham was a prophet, what qualified Abraham to be a prophet? And one of the reasons why what qualified Abraham to be a prophet is that Abraham became a messenger of God. He proclaimed the purpose and the will of God when God called him to leave his country and to go into this land as well. And then he established himself as a prophet when he began to set up these altars of sacrifice everywhere he went. And the Lord appeared unto him, and God began to speak unto him. So, what identified him as a prophet is that God was always speaking to him directly, his will and his purpose and his plans. And so that's what a prophet is. A prophet is someone that God speaks to and reveals his plans and his purpose. Right? He foretells of what he wants, right, for his people, for the world, for the nation, things like that. And that's why he has been identified as a prophet, and that he's able to speak those things out. So we see that over and over again, that he is a messenger of God. Right. So that's how we know when it talks about him being a prophet. He receives the revelation of God, God's will, his thought, his purpose, his plans. right? A verse which is different than a priest, right? We said a priest speaks on behalf of the people to God, right? Intercedes on behalf of the people before God, presents the problems and the weaknesses and the frailties of man on behalf of God for mercy and repentance, things like that. The prophet is the reverse way. It's God speaking to the people, his plan, his will, his purpose, right, as well. Verse 7 says, now therefore restore the man his wife. So God is speaking to Abimelech, telling him, restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet. Oh, I'm just rereading it again. But he, and for the next part, but he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. Now, this is the first time I'm seeing an advancement in the role of Abraham. Abraham, we said he offered sacrifices unto God. God appeared unto him. God revealed his plans and his purpose and gave him great prophecies, things like that. Um, and now then we learn that Abraham, he intercedes, he's a friend of God. He begins to intercede with God. And that's part of what a prophet is. A prophet, when we talk about prophets, right, what was spoken of David, what was spoken of Jesus as a prophet as well, that they reached this status of being a friend of God, right? That you've entered into this close proximity or fellowship with God, that he reveals his secrets to you, right? That's what a prophet is. A prophet is someone that God reveals his secrets to. And what was spoken of Abraham in Genesis chapter 18 was that I know him, that I can tell him the secrets. He's a friend, and I can reveal these things. He's speaking of what will happen to Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot there. Right, he says, I can tell him these things, whatever. Right. So you reach this place of being a friend of God. Right. But even though we talked about this, when you come into Christ, Jesus said, we talked about this before, Jesus says, you are no longer our servants, but you are my friend. So we also reach this kind of this status of being in the knowing the plan of God in Christ Jesus, because through Christ he reveals us all the things that are to come, and he reveals it through the book of Revelation that we know, but he reveals his plan and purpose. So in the sense that we are now have the prophecies of God as well as believers. When we believe on him, when we read the word and through revelation of the spirit, things are revealed to us as well. And Jesus said to his disciples where he left, he said, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, because you have believed on me, and you believe the word that God has sent to me, and and you've heard these things and you believe them. So we come into this type of fellowship as well, because the mysteries and the prophecies of God have also been given to us, and then we proclaim them as messengers as well, right? So that's how we also follow in the same line as Abraham did as well. We are the descendants of Abraham, so we receive a lot of both the position and status and stature that Abraham had as well. I know this is something sounds kind of strange to be talking about, but as descendants of Abraham being our father as well, we carry the same aspects of the relationship that is also afforded to us as well as Abraham had. We as his children and heirs by faith as well, the same relationship as well. But here we see that he's been revealed as a prophet, and now we see a progression of God using him. He tells him that Abraham will pray for Abimelech, right? And he will live. So this curse of death is now reigning over Abimelech. And then this next part of what he's told to do, he's told to, if thou restore her not, then thou shalt surely die, and thou and all that are thine. So this curse upon him is that, man, if you don't restore Sarah, you will surely die, and everything that are yours will die. His men servants, his wife, his children, everything is going to die because you are messing with this prophet, right? And this is one of the things that we begin also to understand, that the relationship that God has with his messengers is that, which is abused a lot of time. There's this scripture that says, touch not mine anointed one, or whatever. And people use that because God had given that revelation, touch not my anointed, because if you do, then there's a great danger that comes upon someone that interferes with the message of God coming to the people, right? And so he protects his prophets for that reason, right? And we see an early indication of this playing out right here as well, right? So Abraham, again, in his role of interceding, He's now called to he intercede for Lot. Now he's called to intercede on behalf of Abimelech as well. Verse 8, it says, therefore Abimelech rose up early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. So Abimelech, in this dream, after this dream ends, he understands what he needs to do. He needs to restore his wife. He needs to go to Abraham, and Abraham's a prophet, and Abraham needs to pray over him to remove this curse of death. And he needs to restore Sarah, his wife. So he rose up early in the morning. Again, we talked about this theme of what it means to this phrase "early in the morning." What's that often associated with what it symbolizes. Again, this represents God renewed mercies. Right when the morning came, right? The morning was the time for deliverance. It was the time of God's renewed mercy. It meant hope for Lot when the morning came and the angels took him out when the morning came and put him without the city, and then judgment fell. Again, when we see a morning here, it's the same thing as well. It's a time for opportunity for deliverance and mercy and hope to come upon Abimelech to remove this curse and this judgment that was upon his life. That now is that time for it's going to take place, right? And it's good here that it talks about here that it says the men were sore afraid. So it shows that they had a fear of God, a fear of the Most High God, right? Of course, we're going to see 400 to 500 years later that's going to be completely gone, right? But now we see there was a time where the men had a fear of God, here, his servants. Verse 9, it says, then Abimelech called Abraham, as he was told to do. He was told to reach out to Abraham, and Abraham was going to pray for him. And in that process, God will restore him and restore his family, restore all that he had. So Abimelech, he is responding appropriately. That's what he's told to do. He was given a choice: says you can do it or you cannot do it. If you don't do it, you'll surely die in all that you have. But now I'm giving you another choice. If you do it, then everything will be restored and all will be well. Right. So he is being very obedient to the instruction and to the command of God. So it shows a lot about the integrity of Abimelech as king of the Philistines here. And then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? So he's telling Abraham, like, why have you done this? Right. Well, what has thou done? What hast thou done unto us, and what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought upon me and upon my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done this deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And then verse 10, it says, Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? Now, this is kind of a twofold thing that's going on here. He's asking him, why have you done this to me? And then what did you see about my kingdom that made you act this way to say that Sarah is my sister? Now, this what sawest thou also relates to the fact that God had told him that Abraham was a prophet. And what do we know about prophets? Prophets are able to have insights into and discernment into what's right and what's wrong, because God has revealed to the prophets, things that are wrong and things that are right, and they're called to let it be made known, to preach, to warn, things like that. And so when God told Abimelech that he was a prophet, then now he knew that, okay, well, what did you see? Because that's what a prophet does. He sees things. And so Abimelech understood. He's like, okay, well, what did you see? He says, the reason why you've done this unto us is because you saw something. What is it that you saw? But then verse 11 says, Abraham said, because I thought, right? He says, I thought, right? He didn't say I knew, but he says, I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. Right. So he thought that that's how the Philistines were, because that was a previous experience that he had. Um, I think he went into Egypt or something. I can't remember exactly where he went. But he went someplace and they took his wife. I cannot recall. I should have gone back and looked at that. Right. Exactly what place he was at when that happened. Right. They took his wife. Um, so he says, I thought there was no fear of God in this place. So there was some things that perhaps were going on in the land of the Philistines. They probably, of course, were doing idolatry and things like that. They were living lives, of course, that were indicating that they were not serving the Most High God. And so because of that, he feared all of that. And so, he lied. Well, he didn't lie, but he's, deceitful, said, Sarah was his sister, right? And that's how he said surely there's no fear of God in this place. So there's some things that he saw, right, as a prophet, that he was aware of, that he said, no, these people don't serve the true living God. Their hearts are not clean. Their hands are not clean. Their hearts are not clean. They're going to do the wrong thing when they see my wife, right? So he said, I thought you guys were going to slay me for my wife's sake. Verse 12, and it says, and yet indeed she is my sister. So he's saying, I didn't lie to you. This is Abraham responding to Abimelech's question. He said, I didn't lie to you. Indeed, she is my sister. Verse 12, she is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. So that's the key thing there, right? And she became my wife. So again, every time we hear of Sarah, it's in the reference of that she is my wife, because that's the focus of the problem here, is that Abimelech took another man's wife, and that wife he took was Abraham's wife. Verse 13 says, it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, this is the kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, he is my brother. So again, Abraham is rehearsing to Abimelech that they had come up with this kind of scheme that every time that he would go into these new lands where people may not be favorable toward him, because evidently Sarah, even in her 80s, must have been like some hot mama or whatever, that 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 the men will look at her and just say, "Wow, man, she's very desirable. She's very, very beautiful." Even in her older years, that men would still want to come and take her, right? So they devised this plan because he thought they would try to snatch her up and then they would slay him. So this is the scheme that they put together. Verse 14, right? So what God told Abraham to do was what God told Abimelech to do was just to restore um, Sarah back unto Abraham. But what Abimelech does, he does more than that. Verse 14, it says, and Abimelech took sheep, and he took oxen, and he took men servants and women servants, and gave them unto Abraham. And in addition to that, he restored him Sarah, his wife. Right. So on the first hand, Abimelech, he took Sarah. But now then we see here after the change of the revelation that okay, he took another man's wife. Now he takes sheep, right? So he took Sarah, and in return he restores Sarah, and then he gives back to Abraham restitution for his actions of taking another man's wife, and also for good favor as well. Right? He's doing the right thing. He says, you know what? I wronged you taking your wife, right? I'm going to give you restitution more. Men servants and women servants, right? He gave unto Abraham, it says. So he gave unto Abraham, right? And restored unto him Sarah, his wife. Verse 15, it says, and Abimelech said, behold, my land is before thee, dwell well, it pleaseth thee. So now he's also saying, you know what? I want to live in harmony with you. Wherever you want to be, there's no need to live in fear. It is like this area that we're talking about is like the area of what we would call Gaza today. Let me see right here. So he is down in this region right here, Gerar. This area right here today would be associated with the area of Gaza, where they're fighting at right now, right? And this is where he says, wherever you want to be, hang here, stay there as long as you want. You can have peace, whatever, and stuff like that. So we see that that's also what he's extending. He says, all the land that's before me, just dwell there wherever it please. They have nothing to fear about. So it's the complete opposite of what Abraham thought. He thought that he was going into a land where these people would be anti God and would have evil hands and unclean hearts. But he finds out that's actually the opposite here, right? And I think some of it may have to do with the awareness of the Most High God, especially after Sodom and Gomorrah happened. They knew, man, God is a righteous God, and if you do iniquity and exalt yourself before God, man, God will bring down fire and brimstone upon you and wipe you out and destroy you, right? As well. Verse 16 says, and unto Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus was she reproved. So he responds to Abraham with giving him, say, hey, wherever you want to stay, you can stay. He says he gave him his oxen and he returns his wife. Then he speaks to Sarah and he says, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces. So it's kind of like he's saying, yeah, this is your brother. Okay. Um, it says that, and thus she was reproved. So he's reproved like, yo, you set me up. I know this was your wife, I mean, I know this was your husband. But since this was an issue related to your brother, I want you to know I've restored your brother, right? But what he's also saying is that here when he says, "Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes." What King Abimelech is saying is that because this is a true thing that Abraham is Sarah's brother, as a brother, Abraham is to be there to rightfully protect his sister, right? And that's what he was called to do. And that is one of the things that he was doing. He was protecting his sister and he was protecting himself. And he's there to also be a covering and protection for Sarah, both as a husband and as a brother as well. And that's what he was trying to do, be a protection and a covering for Sarah to keep her from harm and things like that as well. And that's what a brother should do. So he's saying, you know what? Abraham, as your brother, he's supposed to be a protector and a covering for you. He's acknowledging that. He says, you know what? Yes, you are his wife, Abraham's wife, but you are also his brother as well. And his brother's there to look after you and to be a covering for you and to protect you and things like that. So he then blessed Abraham on behalf of Sarah 1,000 pieces of silver. Right. Verse 17 it says, and so Abraham prayed unto God. So that was the other thing that Abimelech was called to do. Go to Abraham, and Abraham was to pray unto God on behalf of Abraham. And it says, when Abraham prayed, God healed Abimelech and his wife. So we see here that Abimelech already had a wife. So here he is. He was going to engage in polygamy, right? And then Abraham, when he prayed unto God for Abimelech, also healed his maidservant. So it says it healed Abimelech. So I believe that there was affliction on the body of Abimelech so that he was perhaps impotent, unable to form intimate acts with Sarah, and that was the reason why he had not intervened or done anything yet because God had put something on him. And when Abraham prayed, he healed that aspect of Abimelech and restored him, and restored his wife as well, and restored his maidservants, and they bear children. So the effect of what happened is God shut down the reproductive ability, shut all that stuff down upon the men and the women as well. And so verse 18 kind of confirms this when it says, for the Lord had fast closed up all the wounds of the house of Abimelech because Sarah, Abraham's wife. Now, what I don't really understand is why the response of shutting down all the women, whether it be his wife and his maid servants, why he closed up the womb of all these women in response to Abimelech taking Sarah's wife. We know that Sarah's womb, I think during this time, maybe already with child, perhaps, because it said within when Abraham was speaking with the Lord before those two angels went to Lot, the Lord came there to say within the next year that you're going to be with child. So it is likely at this point that she was already with child. Maybe she didn't even, it wasn't even known that, whatever, but that was already proclaimed upon her that she's going to be, about a year from now she's going to be with child. So I would think that this is almost within that time frame here as well, that she's probably with child. But the one thing I don't understand is why God closed up all the wounds yet. So I'll keep that in prayer to see why was this response here. It is revealing something spiritual about this thing here. Okay, I think that wraps up. Woohoo! Genesis chapter 20. I think this is a first to get through one chapter and one Bible setting. Any comments or questions?